SIFMA has benefited from a strong working relationship with the JSDA on a variety of issues going back to the early 1980s. In that time, we've had a very fruitful collaboration on issues of mutual interest and concern, ranging from cross-border taxation issues and global financial market reform to sustainable finance. We have developed a strong foundation for greater collaboration in the future with a shared goal of improving the financial sector's contributions to sustainable growth around the world.
As you know, the United Nations announced the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The JSDA and the entire Japanese securities industry will also make a concerted effort to contribute to this goal initiative. With these points in mind, today's topic will cover the expected roles of the securities market and the industry in developing a sustainable economy and society.
That the Japanese government will encourage innovation through artificial intelligence and robotics, and will support investments into human resources and equipment by companies, especially small and medium-sized entities, which are suffering from an acute shortage of workers. These measures may be part of the 2018 budget and tax plan. And it doesn't stop there. The government is taking measures aimed at helping corporations develop path-breaking services and creative business models. It is working to enhance corporate governance, and it is embarking on work-style reform, such as equal pay for equal work and limits to overtime, which are meant to improve quality of life and overall efficiency.
Let me give a brief overview of the global economy. Now, this is our latest update of the World Economic Outlook, just released last month. So the global growth, it continues to be strong. The growth has been accelerating since mid-2016. Data point to the further strengthening of activities, both in this year and next. So we revised our forecast for global growth in 2018 and 19 to our 3.9%, 0.2% higher than our last forecast in October last year, and which is also the 0.2% higher than 2017. The primary sources of the global acceleration have been in Europe and Asia, and with improved performance in the US and Canada and some emerging markets. So this is the broadest synchronized global growth.
The monetary policy tools have been so creative, so extreme, and so aggressively used. What will be left to work with in the next downturn? I would like to just focus on some of the risks that I can see that that would pose a threat to that continued level of economic growth. And my simple point is, I will elaborate it as time allows, but really I have only one point. The central banks have been doing heroes' works. And when Mr. Kuroda took his first term in office, and that first arrow of the 3 arrows went off with such an explosion, there began this discussion in the United States as well when the Fed started expanding its balance sheet, and the discussion was, are we expecting too much from the central banks? Can they solve all of our problems? That discussion has quieted down, but it's my contention that we assume now, after so many years, that they will, and that the political process, which we need to solve some of these issues that will impact economic growth, is dysfunctional. In our country, we can't even have a Congress that can agree to pass a 2-week budget.
Now, the last thing I want to talk about is yield curve control. So obviously there's kind of the way QE has been implemented in the US, which is sort of direct asset purchases. One of the, I think, the really interesting questions is whether or not, if it comes to this again, we shouldn't think about yield curve control. One of the things I've spent some time thinking about in the last year is the sort of history of how the Federal Reserve has thought about its balance sheet, in particular the asset side of it. One of the things I find striking about that history is the Federal Reserve ran this incredibly successful strategy during World War II and the immediate aftermath. The United States government took its debt to GDP ratio from about 35% in 1938 to 115% in 1945. During that period, the Fed was very successfully essentially pegging the yield curve. And this very successful policy was ended in 1951.
If we don't have any institutional change in social security system, the cost of social security would increase by 1 trillion yen. Only, 1 trillion yen. So, but we have kept total expenditure less than 100 trillion yen. In the meantime, thanks to the good economy and tax hike of the consumption tax from 5% to 8%, we have tax revenue has increased. So we have narrowed the difference, gap between expenditure and tax revenue.
This powerful monetary easing under QQE has been producing a remarkable effects. The BOJ has succeeded in reducing real long-term interest rates to levels well below the natural rate of interest. It is the first time in its 2-decade-long battle with the zero lower bound on the short-term policy interest rate. Against the background, the output gap has improved steadily, corporate profits have marked record highs, and the labor market is very tight at virtually full employment. On the price front, annual CPI inflation, excluding fresh food and energy, has been positive as a trend for about 4 years.
That there is sort of this captive labor force that you can't bid them away. So is that something that should be fixed if we want to see wage increases?
I think Kuroda-san is right. They're under the lifetime employment system, and the priority is the job security rather than the wage increase. So I think it is important to change the work style and the system of employment and wages.
Over the past 3 years, we have seen more and more businesses directly aligning their strategies with SDGs and helping governments to driving national implementation. We're witnessing the gradual coming together of the core business of the private sector with the strategic goals of the international community. As the Secretary General said last year at the World Economic Forum in Davos, there is a growing consciousness that is the business of business is not only business. This is particularly clear when we look at climate change. Investment in green business is good business. And the green economy is creating many opportunities for profitable investment for the private sector. Business is now a key driver of climate action. This growing alignment was also evident at the second SDG Business Forum held at the United Nations last July.
Taken root among corporate managers, and the impact is apparent. For instance, according to the latest data from a periodic survey on listed companies, as of July 2017, 88% of listed companies appointed at least 2 independent outside directors, while independent outside directors also make up about a third of the board at 27% of companies. In addition, another driver of improving corporate performance in Japan is the increase in companies adopting ROE as a management benchmark and a keen focus on capital efficiency. It is no coincidence that Japanese corporate profits have recorded new yearly highs since fiscal year 2016 and are on track to do so again for the 3rd straight years.
There's a really significant amount of outward M&A activity at the moment. Obviously, domestic demand is kind of tight at the moment, and it will tighten with a slowing population growth. Last year, in 2017, $121 billion was involved in outward bound M&A activity across many sectors, including telecoms and pharma and various convenience and food and manufacturing. So those are all significant figures. We've talked about also the huge amounts of money that are in the pension funds. The biggest pension fund in the world is the public pension fund is GPIF, with significant funds under assets, $1.3 trillion, I think.
Stewardship code from the point of view of the investor, we see how important it is for transparency. And really what we must do as an investor is being able to show what is our voting patterns, what are the policies, being really clear about conflict of interest. But in return, we know it's about being able to have a great deal of sustainable growth. This is a really key aspect. There's always this conflict between demonstrating short-term results and the need for what would be longer-term investing patterns, so there's not short-term trading activity. But there's always this conflict and tension, and that's why it's really important that there's transparency, certainly on the investor side, to say, what is our expectation and what are we investing for? To give you a short story, very short, I was honored to be on one of Prime Minister Abe's on the reform agenda committee, which is around the pillar as it related to the communication between the investors and the companies themselves.
First is the role of environment, ESG, in Japan's economy, and second is the development of corporate governance in Japan. Management has very keen interest in ESG because it could have impact on their funding costs, and various sections are very involved, such as risk management or corporate planning and treasuries. In conclusion, I think the corporate governance reform coupled with ESG investment will have significant positive impact on Japan's corporate and Japan's economy, and the change will be accelerated probably in the near future. So I would like to make best efforts toward this development.
Climate change and broader sustainability agenda has become a growing imperative and focus for global policies around the world. We saw this certainly with the UN SDG presentation, but also having worked in environmental markets for over a decade, it was quite remarkable to see in 2015 the almost 200 nations coming together in an unprecedented way to obviously commit to the historic climate agreement in Paris. And then leveraging off of that, we are seeing increasing ambitions from national countries around the world that are leveraging their own policy agendas, not only to meet the climate change goal and the SDGs, and of course Japan has been a lead on that front, but also very much to drive economic growth, innovation, and job creation. Because of this global trend that we're seeing, ESG as well as clean energy has now become a core part of how we serve our clients across each and every one of our businesses across the globe, and therefore it's very much a tangible business opportunity for us.
And I'm going to make it into 2 points. One is on the retail side. So at Daiwa and Japan, we have been very good at promoting fixed income products to our retail base. It could be green bonds, social bonds. So that has, I think, in terms of issuance and our contribution, has been quite significant. But on the other side, as Mr. Mori mentioned and Mr. Furuya mentioned, investment in risk assets has been quite low. And what we can do to address that is easier said than done. But the NISA that Mr. Mori mentioned, which has tax incentives, I think will help us, the buy side and the brokers, to introduce the product and to buy into risk assets.
Judy, I just want to pick up on the point that you meant was vision statements.
You seem to suggest this is incredibly central. So could you tell us, you know, why, I mean, there can be empty words. Why is it so important?
It's actually a continuation of this cash comment. So it's not good enough just to raise dividends just a little bit, just to make the investors happy, and you hope they go away for a while. But it's really understanding what's your long-term vision to reinvest in the company. So